You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we tackle a critical security topic that every backup admin needs to understand: passwords versus passkeys. Listen, if you're still protecting your backup system with just usernames and passwords, you are asking for trouble. Bad actors are targeting backup systems first, and they know exactly what they're doing. Prasanna and I will break down why traditional passwords aren't cutting it anymore, why MFA is better but not perfect, and why passkeys are probably the future of authentication. Your backup system is your last line of defense. Let's make sure that you're protecting it right. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. And I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that we had no backups of the production database that we had just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the show. Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me a guy that I think might now be working on cars more than me, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm doing well, Curtis. So, two things. One, it's not my own cars, but I am learning about cars. I am taking an auto shop class at the local community college, which is amazing because, as a lot of longtime listeners know, I tend to be, I used to attend YouTube University, which is what my instructor calls it. Basically, watch a bunch of things on YouTube, be amazed.
That's funny. Yeah.
Learn about it, but never actually do anything with that knowledge. So I decided to mix things up, and so I decided to sign up for auto class. So this is my second quarter doing chassis stuff. So learning how to mount, unmount tires, balance tires, patch tires, take apart differentials and axles in a solid axle, did ball joints and control arm bushings, going to learn how to take out, remove and replace shock absorber in the truck. So
that's all so cool. Yeah, very, very cool. I'm a little jelly. I don't have the time right now to do that. I just got too much going on, but the big thing right now, of course, all of my spare time is being used to try to finish the next book that Dr. Mike Saylor and I are writing on responding to and recovering from ransomware. There are, I think, dozens of books on how to prevent from getting ransomware. I think we're going to be the first book that's just about responding and recovering. And so I'm excited about that, but it is taking up all my spare time. Yeah. Of which I didn't have a bunch of anyway, so.
And just a quick question, though. The initial comment, you're like, a guy who's working more on cars than you do. You used to work on cars all the time on your cars.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You did all the work on your cars before.
Yeah.
It's just now your current vehicle does not require much maintenance, if any at all.
Yeah. I like the first thing that it might need me to do, I'm still like 120,000 miles away from probably my first brake job, right? Yeah. Because I have a Tesla and you don't use the brakes a lot, and so the brakes tend to last like 200,000 miles. Right now, all I have to do is water, windshield washer, and tires. Yep. And I do the windshield washer, but I do not do the tires. Anyway. So,
what are we talking about today?
Yeah, today I've been spending a lot of time with the cyber side of things, and I've been learning a little bit more about those that have listened to the podcast. We're like immutable storage, password management,
patch.
What do you call it? Security updates and MFA.
Yep.
These are the things. If you did these things, then things would be so much easier for you, right? and I'm still down with that, but I think enough time has passed with the new way of doing that I think it's time for us to spend a little bit of time talking about the new way to manage logins to a system. Why are you're doing your thing?
Well, the new way is basically things that started 11 years ago or 12 years ago.
Yeah, but it's still not. For example, it's still not available
everywhere
in many systems and products.
Yeah,
and in other systems, it's only available as a third, like a third-party add-on to that product.
Yeah, and
so it's still pretty freaking new.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk about it, but this is also useful because I've started seeing this pop up in many places and always been like, what is this thing? Why is it different? How is it different? So hopefully this episode we can dive into some of those differences and understand, is this really good for you and should you be using it?
Yeah, and by the way, just to not completely bury the lead, we're talking about Passkeys, right? We're talking about FIDO, Passkeys, which fall under FIDO, which is basically a whole other way to do authentication and authorization, right? Yep. Or would it be IAM? IAM would be the overarching term that would cover that? Yeah. Okay, so we've made a lot of talk about that. If your backup system is all powerful, your backup system is I often say your backup system is Helm's Deep. Do you get that reference?
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. What was Helm's Deep? Do you remember?
It is basically a fortress inside of a mountain that's supposed to be impenetrable by pretty much anything, and it's supposed to be like you lock it down and no one's coming to get you. You will survive.
Yeah, and if you watch the Return of the King, like basically the battle gets all the way down to Helm's Deep, and like if they get in there, like the battle's over, right? Yeah. And the same kind of thing here, that it's the last defense. If you lose your backup and recovery system, your disaster recovery system, why even do it, right? Yeah. And so I spend a lot of time trying to explain to people that, sort of two things. One, that your backup system is absolutely a target for cyber attacks. In fact, last night I went to, very cool. It's been going on pretty regularly, and I haven't gone, but now it's my first time, and it's this big cyber event in San Diego. It was great. I kind of like forced myself to go. I don't know why, because I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. Yeah, I had very low expectations, and I got there, and I'm just going to say this: lots of people. Lots of fascinating people to talk to. Some of them thought I was one of those fascinating people to talk to.
You just have a lot of stories.
And I do have a lot of stories.
Yeah.
More importantly, free food and free beer. Why did I wait so long, right? So you only got one free drink, but I managed to just serendipitously be standing next to the guy that had the tickets. So he was like, "You guys want some more tickets?"
Nice.
So I got 3 free beers, I got 2 free beers, and then I had one that I paid for. And the craziest part was when they handed me the little payment thing. The choices for tip were 3%, 5%, and 7%.
What?
I chose not to ask. I was like, okay. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting, but it was great, and I got a chance to talk to some people, and I made this same comment about how much the backup system is a target for ransomware, and the guy's like, oh yeah, that's he's like, I have clients. He goes, it happens all the time. They get in there and they immediately look for, and he named a vendor. He's like, they immediately look for this vendor, and if they find it, they know what to do, and they take it out, right? And so I'm saying you need to understand the degree to which your backup system is 100% a target of ransomware, and that they want to take it out, because if they can take it out, then and this guy would, and he clarified that they want to do this before they do the payload of the actual attack, right?
Remove all the defenses.
Exactly, right? And so one of the things that you want to do is to make it really, really hard to be able to log into your backup system for an outsider. You don't want to make it really, really hard for you, but you made it a little bit harder for you, but make it much, much harder. And what is, if people aren't doing the things that we're talking about, either of the things that we're talking about in this episode, what's the worry?
They'll come into your system. They'll delete your backups. They'll set a retention time to 0 days or 1 day, right?
Yeah.
So now all your backups, your ability to recover from ransomware are gone. They'll disable policies. So now you're not even backing up anything anymore. They'll lock you out of the system. So they'll reset all the access. And then the other thing is they now know, like, they could look and say, okay, what are the important systems in your environment?
Yep.
Because your backup system knows where everything is.
Yep. Yeah, it's great for exfiltration. It's great for all kinds of things. By the way, that was a great answer. It wasn't the question I was asking. Oh. The question that I was asking, and I'll answer it myself then. Fine, I'll do it myself. What I was saying was, the problem is if you're not using either MFA or Passkeys, right, is that someone, ultimately the security of your entire backup system rests on every single person who has super user access to that backup system. All it takes is one click, wrong email, whatever, and boom, your password is exposed, right? Your username and password. And if all that's stopping a threat actor from logging into your backup system is a username and password, you are just asking for it. Yep. Asking for it, right? Yeah. And honestly, I'm going to have like a little bit of sympathy if you get hacked because of that, but it's hard. It's hard for me to dredge up sympathy for.
Here's my little violin.
What's that?
Here's my little violin.
Little violin. Yeah. So like I do believe strong, and we've talked about this before. We have a strong opinion on password managers. What are they? What is it?
Use. Maybe one more use. You should be using a password manager. If you're not, something's wrong.
Yeah. By the way, I saw a great, in researching for this episode, I saw a great quote. And it was, I've never known anyone that got hacked because they used a password manager. But I know all kinds of people that got hacked because they didn't use a password manager. Think about it. There have been password managers that have been hacked, but but for example, like the worst, of course, was the LastPass. Even with that one, you had to severely misuse LastPass to be attacked via LastPass. Because the problem was that basically their vault got
compromised,
compromised, but that didn't mean people got access to your passwords. What they got was access to encrypted versions of your passwords. So as long as you had a decent password for your passwords, right? If you didn't have like a six-digit password as your,
So I will fault them. I know this is a long time episode ago, but one thing I will fault them for, right, is they did use weak encryption in the initial versions. So if you have an old password vault that you've had for years, right, it was using a weaker algorithm, which could potentially be broken.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
But we still don't know. We don't know anybody that. Yeah. Anyway, but so don't do that. Don't have a weak password. And don't, I would investigate that. But, and not all password managers are equal and all this kind of stuff, right? But I do believe strongly in having a separate password for everything, using a separate password manager. I also believe strongly in having your backup system use a completely separate IAM system than your production network, right? Not having your backup systems join the domain, for example, right? Which means that you're going to need something separate. So I'm saying buy an inexpensive password manager for the backup side, only the backup side, and have it be completely separate from the, from your main side.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you have a backup system, you have a password manager. How do you back up the password manager for the backup system so you could eventually restore it if you need to? It's like Inception.
The answer to that question will be dependent on the password manager, right? And we did have an episode, by the way, of the catch-22 situation of how do you recover when you've lost everything, including your password manager.
Yep.
Right.
With Susie.
What's that?
With Susie, right?
Yeah, Susie. If you could help me with that, pull up the spreadsheet and we'll get the link, and I'll put that in the show description of it. That was a fascinating episode as well. Okay, so generally, most people are still using usernames and passwords, hopefully strong passwords, hopefully with a password management system. But even with all of that, if they're not using an additional factor to log in, they are still wide open to all kinds of attacks, right? Yep. And SaaS vendors are starting to see this one by one. They are at it. Literally, this is in the last 5 years, 10 to 5 years. They started, number one, supporting MFA of some type. Number two, the better ones, like Google, for example, require MFA.
Yep.
Right. And
for MFA, right, there's sort of the good, better, best, right? Even for MFAs that you need to take into consideration.
So we're going to cover that. Yeah. I'm just saying that there's sort of two things of number one, supporting MFA, and number two, requiring. I think that any decent product should be requiring it at this point. Yep. Right. I pushed hard for that when I worked at Druva. Right? They started supporting it, but at the time they didn't want to force it on their customers. Yep. And I was saying, force it. What customer is going to complain that you're forcing security on their backups? Yeah. And if that is a customer, I don't want that customer. Yeah. Right. But I think that you should, on anything that matters, you should be forcing MFA at this point, right? So what is MFA? You want to just talk about what does that mean? What is,
So MFA is basically multi-factor authentication. So like you said, right, you enter your username and password to log into a website, but they want to use another method as well to verify it's you. So it might be something like send you an email to an email address registered in the system, send you a text message to a phone number registered, call you. There's also applications, authenticator applications like Authy, Google Authenticator, and others that you can use in order to provide that second factor to prove that, yes, this is me and not some malicious actor out there.
Right. And the order, and by the way, the category of the last category that you talked, that's called an OTP, or a one-time password generator. The Google Authenticator, I think, was the first freely available one, and a lot of people still refer to it as Google Authenticator, even if you're using Authy, which is a competitor. But the order in which you listed them, I think, would be the order of goodness. Yeah. Right? Good, better, best, right? Good is having something. Yep. Right? Using your email as your additional factor, not very good at all. Email, that means if your email was hacked, then your factor is hacked, right? Yep. And I have seen situations where the entire corporate email system was hacked. Yep. And then the backup system used email as the factor, and the people they successfully took over the backup system. Yep. Because they had already successfully taken over the email system. So email, not so good. SMS is also not so good.
Especially these days. Right?
Why is that?
Well, because SMSs could be hijacked, right? You could do a SIM swap. And also, if you're following the latest news, right, many providers have had their SMS, or actually their communications networks, compromised.
Right.
right? And you now have the U.S. government telling people you should use end-to-end encrypted applications.
Yeah. 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 For anything that matters, you should totally use that. And so again, either of these is better than nothing. So if you have a system that only supports email or SMS, then use it anyway.
Yep.
But strongly encourage that vendor, whoever they are, to support OTP or passkeys. We're going to get to passkeys in a minute.
So there are cases where they actually had physical hardware that would sort of rotate keys, right? And then when you want to access something, you would basically read the number off the key, right, and type it in to log in. And of course, it was synchronized with the back end and all the rest. So it would always know like what the number should be. And that's kind of how you would access the system.
Yeah.
Not as convenient.
Not as convenient, yeah. But very secure, right? Yeah. So you had to, in order to log in, you had to know the username and password. And then the additional factor came from the fact that you had physical possession of that thing, that key fob, right? And then use that, right? Yeah. That did require that device had to be able to be synchronized to a clock.
Yep.
So that it would know exactly when, because it would do like an extra one every 30 seconds, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, you were talking about you had to be on the back end.
Yeah.
So you had to be able to know what number was going to be on that device. That's a very, very strong factor, not as convenient because you have to carry it around.
Or if it broke, then you couldn't log in.
Yeah. If it broke, if you stepped on it.
Yep.
Yeah, and so that's why a lot of people, they have gone to the OTP, the Authy or Google Authenticator. That's what I personally use. I used Authy. I used Google Authenticator for a while until I went to move my phones, and I didn't realize that I had to transfer it while my phone was still alive, and I ended up having to redo all my MFA. And that's nice because it can be basically it's wherever your factor is kind of the fact that you have sort of actually multiple factors because you have to have possession of the phone, the device where this app is running, and you have to be able to log into that phone to get to that application. So it's kind of like multiple factors. By the way, some people also refer to this as 2FA. Technically, it's MFA because there could be more than two factors. But that's what some people call it, was 2FA back in the day. And I think a strong MFA with a strong password is a pretty strong system. Having said that,
but
there is a thing called MFA exhaustion. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this is basically, and we saw this in, what was that case? Was it the Okta breach? Right. Yeah. Where basically people, right, in the normal case, MFA is great, but bad actors have started exploiting this, and they will try to log in and it will send an MFA request to the user. And sometimes it's like, okay, accept that this is me. And sometimes they get so tired of always seeing it. They're like, fine, screw it. I'm just going to push accept. Fine. Yeah. Exactly. And so now they've let the bad actor into the system when they shouldn't have.
Which is exactly what happened with the Okta hack, right? Yeah. It was actually an inside person at Okta that essentially fell for an MFA exhaustion attack, and they ended up letting the threat actor into the system, and bad things happened.
Yep.
As a result, right? Yeah. And so there are exploits known for MFA, still way better than the alternative, right? Yeah. And I when I think about the MFA exhaustion, my brain, the way if I got 57 MFA requests, I'd be like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, man, what is going on? The last thing I'm going to do is go, yeah, stop bothering me here. Let the person in. I don't understand MFA exhaustion, but people are going to be people.
But it could also be the case that while you're legitimately trying to do something, you also get a bad actor trying to do something as well. And so you may be confused. True.
If there's some simultaneous thing, you may authenticate the wrong thing. So there are known attacks against MFA. They are rare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What? Go ahead.
But there is one downside with MFAs, right?
Which is?
Well, assuming that you're not using a password manager, right? You still have to remember the password.
Yes.
If you work in an IT environment, you have to rotate your password.
Yes.
You're now adding password 1, password 2, password 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
right? It's like all the variations. And so it's still that problem that you run into.
So is password 123? That's not a good password?
Oh, that is the best password in the world. It's
But
the most popular. It's the most popular.
Dollar signs.
But
I
it's
use
the most
dollar signs for the S.
But it's the most popular password, so it must be good, right?
I know. Oh Lord. Yes, you're right. That is it is it's funny, like one of the things that people there's the horse battery staple thing, right, which is and their story, they made a point of saying that by coming up with longer and longer passwords and more complicated passwords, we made sure that computers couldn't guess those passwords, but we also made sure that humans could never remember them.
Yep, exactly. So now you write it down on a sticky note, or you use the same variations.
Exactly. Yeah. And I used to have a system before I went to password managers that I've talked about where I had like one core password, and then I appended and prepended a shortened version of the domain name. And, that was I had this way of having a unique password, but without having a unique password. So if my password was password 123, my Gmail password was GM password 123 GM. Right. That was a way that I did it back in the day before I discovered password managers. But
could you imagine remembering all the passwords?
I can't. I have hundreds of accounts.
Yep.
One thing that is starting to happen that I do like is being able to authenticate via like Google.
Yeah.
I do like
or
that.
Apple or whatever provider.
Yeah.
Facebook.
All right. So
passwords have some downsides. Remembering the
passwords
username.
have some downsides. MFA has some downsides. A strong statement was made when I was discussing this with a colleague the other day, and he said there are no known successful attacks against a FIDO-compliant system. And I was like, right? And so I immediately had to Google FIDO.
You're like, what is this? Is this a dog?
I knew what passkeys were. I didn't know that it was called FIDO. I didn't know that it fell under this thing called FIDO. By the way,
FIDO is a framework.
FIDO is the framework under which passkeys fall. So FIDO is an acronym for Fast Identity Online, right? And there is a thing called the FIDO Alliance.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So it's basically a bunch of companies where like passwords suck.
Yeah.
We should do something better. So Microsoft, I don't know if you remember this, with Windows 10 or 11, they did Microsoft Hello.
Yeah.
Right. Trying to ditch passwords. This was probably like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Right. And so there's been this push because companies realize passwords are a pain.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's been a push to sort of get rid of them. And so FIDO was created, and it's joined by a bunch of companies and organizations in order to try to eliminate passwords from the world, if you want to put it that way, right? And FIDO is a framework, right? And Passkeys is just one implementation of using FIDO. It's
probably the biggest implementation, but it is just one implementation, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that you don't have to remember a password. It's been interesting. There's been a push by some vendors to do passwordless login that is very much not FIDO compliant. I don't know if you've seen this, where I've had some SaaS vendors that I'm basically, they don't want you to use your name and password. They say, give us your email and we will send you a one-time password to log in. And I'm like, that's a single factor.
Yeah.
And it's a system that could totally be hacked. So I hate that. That is not what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what, again, I think we should state, we're now getting into the outer reaches of our technical knowledge. We are not cybersecurity professionals. We know enough to be dangerous. If we were implementing something for somebody, we would be bringing in somebody like Dr. Mike Saylor to do this.
So do you want me to walk
ahead.
through kind of how it works?
Yeah, well, the concept. First off, it uses this concept of public key encryption.
Yeah. So let's talk about first like how normal login works, right? So normal website, you're logging in. You know your username and password. The hosting provider, whatever you're logging into, has probably an encrypted version of that, and so it does some computation, sends it over, compares, and says, okay, you're all good to go. Right. Now, what they've done is they've gotten rid of the password part. And there's a couple different ways, right? One is many of these systems, for instance, if you're using a phone, right, in order to access the private key that's stored on the phone will require sort of a biometric verification. So like your face, your fingerprint, maybe a passcode potentially. Right. In order to be able to unlock access to that private key in order to do the rest of the handshake. So that's sort of that second factor or the multi-factor to prove that it is you. So there's a device which contains the key, and then there's the you part to say you are who you are.
That's going to be, like you said, you either like Face ID, thumbprint, passcode, depending on that could be picked by the user. Right. That authenticates you to that device, and then the device authenticates you to the other system.
And there's one other thing to also add is the private key itself. So a lot of the new phones, they have a secure area that's completely cordoned off from everything else where this processing happens. Right. So in Windows desktop, it's called the TPM or Trusted Processor Module, I think. On your iPhones, it's usually called like the Secure Enclave and things like that. So this is a very special secure area where cryptographic functions are done and biometrics are being processed. So your biometrics are never actually sent to the server. Right. It's all run locally just to say you are who you are. Okay, now I can access that private key.
Another very popular, at least in terms of I've seen it a lot. Another implementation of this has been this company called Yubico, and they have these things called YubiKeys, and they are, little thumb systems. We call them thumb drives because you pull them in and out with your thumb, right? Or they look like a thumb, and basically it's something that plugs into the USB. The later ones, they actually have biometric on the device, meaning that you can put a thumbprint on the device. They have other ones that don't have that, which means there must be some authentication in software to the device. What this does is this allows for this kind of authentication to happen on pretty much any computer, either a Windows or a Mac or a Linux-based computer. All you need is that device and some method of authenticating yourself to that device. And what I like about those is that they are incredibly affordable. They're not a sponsor, and there are other vendors, but what I really like about YubiKey is that you can get a YubiKey for like their best YubiKey is like $55. You can buy one of them. And you can start using this with your
but please don't just
in
buy
your
one.
world. I knew you were going to say that. I was waiting for you to say that. What did you just say?
Please don't just buy one.
Why not?
Because if you lose that YubiKey, you lose access to everything.
They should only sell them in pairs.
They do actually sell them in pairs too.
Okay. Yeah. So read it. There are other companies, and those companies are more than welcome to reach out to me. Go ahead.
But this is also where I think, like Apple, Microsoft, Google, right? They also all support Passkeys as well. And one of the benefits of going with that sort of a software-based approach is they normally handle all the synchronization. So Apple, as an example, they will make sure on your iCloud keychain, right, which stores all your passkeys and things like that, they will synchronize it across your devices. Right,
which is very helpful. And again, I'm on the outer reaches of my knowledge here, but I believe this also qualifies as FIDO and a passkey, and that is how I currently log into my credit union. So when I log into my credit union, I had to switch over to this system. And like at some point they told me that this is your choice, right? And I need my username, and then I need a PIN code. So in this case, 4 digits that I do need to remember the PIN code. And then they have an app. In this case, it's the Semantic VIP app that is a one-time password generator. The reason why they like that versus the like Authy. The problem with Authy is that is the synchronization aspect. I think the time synchronization aspect. But so they use what they want me to do is they want me to start up the VIP app, which again I can only access the VIP app if I'm on the device that's been authenticated. So I start up the VIP app, and then I put in my PIN code followed by the 6-digit number that is generated by the app, and that is my password. It goes in the password field, and that way the only thing I have to remember is the PIN code, and I'm pretty sure this qualifies as I don't know if it does or not, but
so my thing with Passkeys is it's supposed to be seamless, right? The fact that you have to jump through these hoops, I think, is one reason why I wouldn't say it's quite the same.
My question is, does it qualify under FIDO?
Oh, that I don't know.
Is it FIDO-compliant?
Because the process
I guess what you're saying is that you don't have to remember anything.
Yeah.
Under a passkey situation, right?
Yeah.
The only thing I have to remember is how to authenticate to the device that has the thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, because you don't even want to remember, you want to remember, very minimal, right? And it shouldn't be something you remember per website.
Right.
It's like your password manager. You just remember the master password. It remembers everything else.
Right.
In this case, you don't even have to remember a master password, right? You just bring you or whatever you do to log into your device, right?
So here's my question. If a FIDO compliant system is so much better, why don't we just use it for everything? Right now, I'm a backup guy, and I want to make sure that my backup system is as secure as it could possibly be. It sounds like FIDO is better. Why don't I just tomorrow I start using this for everything?
Well, 2 things. One is the vendor needs to support FIDO, right? So it's not simple, right? They need to actually build the mechanisms to support it. The other thing, too, is I don't know if FIDO works in a non-connected case. If you're not connected to the internet, will it work?
Well,
it should.
What scenario are you thinking of where I would be running a backup system that's not connected to the internet?
Maybe you're in a skiff or you're in a secure location where you don't necessarily have outside access. I'm sure it would work, but I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure it worked. I think there's a pretty high chance it would work, but again, I also don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the other thing is I think backup admins should be talking to their vendors and saying, please provide me passkeys.
Yeah, and you can tomorrow, right? You can start using something like YubiKey to authenticate yourself. If you have servers, right? There are YubiKey implementations for Unix, Windows, or Linux, Windows, and Mac, and so you could tomorrow reconfigure your logins for all of your devices that have anything to do with if you're using a traditional system that is based on some sort of server, you could change so that the OS you can only log into the OS via YubiKey and Passkeys, right?
And 2 YubiKeys, by the way, please.
2 YubiKeys. And then the harder one will be if you're using a SaaS provider. You should be pressuring them to support Passkey.
Yep.
That's our, again, we're not experts in this. You should talk to an expert in this. If you like the YubiKey thing, check that out. YUBI key. That's the name of the product. Yubico is the company. UB probably stands for something.
I don't know what it stands for.
You be more secure.
That's pretty good. Maybe they could use you in marketing, Curtis.
It's probably I don't know where the name comes from, but so all we're saying is all of this is more secure than just a username and password. MFA is better than nothing. There's 3 levels, right? You got email, SMS, and one-time password generators. The latter is definitely the best.
Yep.
Probably the most secure is an actual key fob. Most people aren't going to use that. Most people are going to use it as an app.
Yep.
And then the Passkeys is probably the most secure of them all, but it requires more changes to your infrastructure.
Yeah.
I will say that if you have servers or backup applications or backup storage that doesn't require either MFA or Passkeys to log in, man, you need to fix that stuff now.
Yeah.
You concur?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. You're just a matter of time.
Yeah, just a matter of time. All right. Once again, we managed to fill 45 minutes talking about something. In the beginning, I was like, I don't know if we're gonna fill the time.
I'm telling you, we always figure out a way to fill the time. It's like sand or water.
It could be that one of us can talk forever. I don't know which one of us it would be.
Yeah.
One of us definitely talks more than the other one. Anyway, I digress. You have a nice day, Prasanna.
Thank you, Curtis, and you as well.
And I hope our listeners have a nice day as well. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.